What up, guys? Welcome to the next tutorial video on Java programming for beginners. And to quickly recap the things that we've learned so far, we have seen how to create a class and the main method and their general use. We have seen how to create a comment, the two types of comments, which are the single line comment that uses two slashes, and the multi-line comment that uses slash with a star. We have seen also how to create a print statement. We also see like the two types of print statements, the one with which creates statements while creating a line, which is the print ln, and the simple print statement, which creates only which outputs only statement without creating any line. And in today's video, we're going to see data types, variables, and constants in Java, and also conditional statements like if else, iterations like for loops and while loops, and nested loops and conditional statements. Yeah, so let's get right into it. So the first thing we're going to see are variables. Variables are space in the memory used to store data. So basically, let's take an example. Let's say there's a person whose age is 57, and if we need to save that or we need to store that, we're going to use a variable name, for example, age, and give it the value of whatever the age was. I don't remember. Let's say it is 37. So yeah, if that person age is 37, we're gonna set a variable name and then set it to 37, and that will be stored in our memory for further use, right? So that's what we call variables. You can think them as the math variable that we use, like x and y. But the only difference is that, for example, if we set x, um, let's say 30, that 30 value of x will stay the same for the rest of the calculation or the math problem, right? For example, if I say 5x, and we know that x is 30, right? So it's basically going to be 150, and it's going to be literally the same for the rest of the math problem. But when it comes to programming or Java in specific, we can change the value of the variables as much as we want. That's basically the only difference there is between the mathematical variables and the programming variables. Okay, let's see how to create a variable. If we take the earlier example that we talked about, which is the age being 37, let's create a variable for that. So, and this is the data type for the variable I'm going to create. Don't worry about that. We're going to talk about it further in the video. So, and then the name of the variable. You can name this whatever you want, but I'll suggest that, uh, being something meaningful for the variable that you're going to use. So, age 37, let's say. Boom. So I've just created a variable named age, and it is 37. The value that I give it is 37. So let's print system. If I print this, it should give me the value that is stored in age, okay? Because we know that the use of a variable is to store something, store a data, right? So if I do this and ran it, you can see here that it printed 37, which is basically age. You know that I didn't use 37 right here, but I called the variable and it showed me 37 right here. Okay, let's talk about data types. I told you earlier that data types are used to create our variables, right? So basically, data types are just a type of information that we're going to store in our variable. On the earlier example, we used age, and we know that age is represented by numbers, right? So we store it, we use the data type int, which is short for integer. So let's talk about that actually. So int consists of integers if we know, like if you know, it consists of negative numbers, zeros, and positive numbers. So in programming, that's also true. So it consists of negative numbers, zero, and positive numbers. So we stored a number right here. It can also be negative, if you can see. You can see right here, run this back, and it should output negative 37. So we can store a negative number, uh, 0 if we want to. Yeah, so it works for only negative numbers, 0 and positive numbers. It does not work for fractions and decimals. So in order to store decimal numbers, we use the data type called double. Let's see an example. So double, then something that is relatable to what you're going to store. For example, let's say I measured something with centimeter and then just put cm, short for centimeter, and then whatever I measured, and then semicolon to finish that. And then let's output our variable system.out dot print. Then one thing I didn't mention is that in order to output a variable, we don't need any quotation marks or any marks uh, whatsoever. We just need their name as they appear or as you put it right here. If it is CM, you put CM right here, or otherwise it wouldn't work. So yeah, so I'll put CM right here, semicolon, then just run this. And then we should find 11.7 right here. So we use double to store decimal numbers and fractions. The next data type we're going to talk about are booleans. So often our programs might face questions that can only be answered with a yes or no. For example, is the light on? That can only be answered with a yes or no, right? So those type of questions are stored using the boolean data type, and it stores only two values, which are true or false. Let's see an example. So first, the data type, then let's say light, if it is on or off, which is represented with true or false. So let's say it is on, therefore we use true, bad, true, and then semicolon, and let's print that out. And then light, variable name, then semicolon, and let's run that. So as you can see here, it's going to be true. We can also make this false and it will work. False. And we can run that back. And you see that output's false, so it works for true and false. But you can see that it wouldn't work for anything else, like a number, for example. It will show an error right here. So it only stores two values which are like true and false. The fourth data type that we're going to talk about are called chars, and chars are used to store single characters. For example, it might be your grade, right? You might got A or B, so those are single characters, and char is used to store those. We also use char to store space and punctuation marks. Let's see an example of that. So char, and then let's say we're storing your grade, so grade. And then don't forget we use single quotes for charts, okay? So single quote and then A, right? Then let's print that out. System panel. Let's make sure that is correct. Yes. So grade, our variable name, then semicolon. And then let's run that. Then it should print A. It will work for space, and punctuation marks, right? So we can also say punctuation marks, boom, and it will output whatever punctuation mark you put in. The last data type that we're going to talk about are called strings. And strings are used to store a sequence of characters, and they use double quotes, opposite to the char, which uses single quotes. So whatever you put in between those double quotes will be a string, okay? Let's see an example of that too. So string, don't forget to make S capital or it won't work. String, and then let's say it is your name is equals to, then double quote, don't forget that. And let's say your name is John, and then semicolon, and let's print that out. Let's make sure that is correct. Yes. Then name, semicolon. And if we run that, we're gonna get okay, that's it for the data types. Let's move on. The next thing we're going to talk about is called control flow or conditional statements. Let's see an example that would explain everything actually. So imagine if we're writing a program that enrolls students in a course, right? If a student has completed, for example, Algebra 1, then they can enroll in Algebra 2 course, right? Else, they need to take Algebra 1 course, right? So they cannot take Algebra 2 without finishing Algebra 1. So we represent this kind of decision making in our program using the conditional or control flow statements. So before this point, like our code runs line by line, right? From top down. So, but conditional statements allows us to be selective in which portion will run. And the other thing we need to know is that conditional statements checks a boolean. We already seen the data type boolean, which stores true or false values, right? So conditional statements checks a boolean condition and run a block of code depending on the condition, right? And we will use curly braces to mark the scope of a conditional block, similar to method or classes that we created earlier on. Let's see how that works. So I have declared a variable right here. I gave it the name, number of students, and the value of 20. And then I started my conditional statement with the if keyword, followed by a parentheses. And then within the parentheses, we've put something that evaluates to either true or false, because we know that number of students is 20 right here, right? And 20 is greater than 10, so it is true. So after the parentheses, we're going to use curly braces now. That is used to mark a block of code. And this block runs if and only if the boolean is true. If it is not true, it will not run the code or the line of code that you put in between those curly braces. So in my example, we know that this is true. So it should run this, which will print out correct, string correct, right? So let's run that. As you can see here, it printed out correct. So we know that this is true, right? What if it was false? Let me show you. So let's make this 30 and let's run that back. And as you can see here, it didn't run anything. So what if we want to run two block of codes? One if it is true and the other one if the statement is false. For example, on the example that I took earlier, I only used one conditional statement, right? And if the statement is false, for example, this is false, right? And if we run this, it will not print anything. It will jump this one because it is false. But what if we want to print something even if it is false? Okay, so this is where else a keyword comes. So after the curly brace, we're gonna add the keyword else. Oh my bad, else. And then we don't need any parentheses, just the curly braces, and then the code that we want to run. System println. And then let's say incorrect because 20 is not greater than 30, right? So incorrect. Finish with semicolon. Then let's run that. As you can see here, it will run incorrect. Okay. So there are now two separate code blocks in our conditional statement. The first block runs if the condition evaluates to true, right? And the second block runs if the condition evaluates to false. This code is also called an if then else statement. So if condition is true, then do something, else do a different thing. That's basically how the if else statement works. The next thing we're going to see is called while loop. So while loop is basically similar to if statement. The code inside the while loop will only run if the condition is true. However, a while loop will continue running the code over and over until the condition evaluates to false, okay? So the code block, for example, here, I've set number of students to 0. And unless number of students is not less than 20 anymore, it will run this line of code over and over again until number of students is not less than 20 anymore, okay? So if we run this, You see? So it will run again and again, 0, 1, 2, 19, and then after it prints 19 right here, and then it adds 1 right here, 20 is not less than 20. So it would stop right there, and it would print, so the last thing that it would print will be 19. So while loops are extremely useful when you want to run some code until a specific change happens. However, if you're not certain that change will occur, be aware of the infinite loop. So infinite loops occur when the condition will never evaluate to false, or it only like evaluate to true. Okay, so this can cause your entire program to crash. Okay, I might show you an example of this actually. So let's remove this. If we remove the incrementation and then set like if it is always equals to 20, it will print number of students, which is 20, every single time this code runs. So if we run this, see here, like it's not working. I'm scrolling with my mouth, but it's not even scrolling. So yeah, it will crash your program. The last thing we're going to see in this video is called for loops. For loops is another conditional statement that we use in Java. So let's see how it is used and how we can write one. So a for loop header is made up of three main parts. The first one being initialization right here. Second one is creating a boolean or a statement that evaluates to either true or false. The third one being the increment or the decrement. Okay? So to explain this, I is close to 0 basically means I is initialized to be 0. I less than 5 is the loop is given a boolean, right? And it relies on the value of I. The loop will continue to execute until I less than 5 is false, okay? And then I plus plus is basically I will be incremented at the end of each loop and before the condition is re-evaluated, okay? Uh, yeah. So we will also hear the term like iteration. It refers to loops. When we iterate, it just means that we are repeating the same block of code. Okay. So for this example, this code will run 5 times. So if we run this, as I told you, it will run 5 times. Let's run it and try it. As you can see here, hello is printed 5 times. The reason that that happened is we gave I the value of 0, right? So every time this loop runs, it will output hello, right? So after that, the value of I is incremented by 1, right? So it's going to be first 0. So 0 is less than 5, therefore it will print hello. Then it will increment by 1, then value of I is going to be 1. 1 is less than 5, that is also true. So it will run this and hello will be printed. So this will be true for 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But when it increments from 4 to 5, 5 is not less than 5, so it will stop there. So it will evaluate to false, therefore it will not run this. So hello will be run only 5 times. Yeah, that's how that works. Okay, guys, that marks our end for this video. See you on the next one.